Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to the Asia Tech Podcast. Gabriel Roux, a co-founder and CEO of Primer, is with us today. I did the most English-sounding pronunciation of your last name. That's terrible. I'm really sorry. Anyway, Gabriel, thanks for coming to the show. It's great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Michael. Thanks for having me on the show.
It is my complete pleasure. Before we jump into what I think is going to be a really interesting conversation, can we give the listeners a little bit of your background for some context?
Absolutely. As you said, my name is Gabriel. You can call me Gab throughout the interview.
Thank you.
I am French and British. Been living in 10 countries. I've actually lived in Hong Kong and Seoul a while back. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Primer. Started the company about 4 years ago. Prior to that, I was at a company called Braintree.
Right.
Braintree was part of the PayPal group. It was the PSP they acquired a couple of years ago, and I was there for 5 years, doing many things. I've done sales for small businesses, for medium businesses, for big ones. I've done partnership, and my last gig at Braintree was actually as part of the product team in San Francisco. So I was working on their new product and services.
Did you leave Braintree with this idea of I've been through all this payment stuff already and I think I can do it better? Or were you trying to, because a lot of time entrepreneurs, right, they run to this particular problem that they're having themselves and they're like, you know what, I'm just going to solve this for me. And I know if it's happening to me, it's happening to everybody. What was it for you?
It's more like solving for others or solving for the merchant, right? So, I've sort of seen a transformation of payments, right? Being in the industry for about 10 years now. When I was at Braintree and PayPal, I was solving with the services we had, right? Which are very good services. But at some point, like talking to businesses, you start realizing that they want to do a lot more with payments, right? It was sort of very clear to myself and my co-founder that the payment stack of a merchant was becoming a lot more than just like a PSP,
Right.
right? They want to use more services. They want to create unique experiences. They want to use payment as a lever for growth and as a way to differentiate themselves. And quickly, when I was in those meetings trying to map out like their payment ecosystem and how they would do all the things they had in mind, you sort of realize, but wait a minute, like I'm not going to be able to solve that with what I'm actually trying to propose right now.
Right.
And the reality is that you as a merchant want to do a lot more than just accepting a payment. You want to optimize for the user experience. You want to optimize for fraud prevention. You want to optimize for data consumption. Many things that I'm sure we're going to talk throughout the interview or the discussion, I should say. And at this point, after 5 years, my co-founder and I, we thought, well, we gotta do something here. There is a revolution that needs to happen in the way like payment is actually being integrated, managed, and consumed. And that's essentially why we started Primer.
So we say in the insurance business, right, that the claim is where the rubber hits the road for insurance, right? Because that's where the real experience is. And it started to make me think that like the payment is one of the few commonalities among every transaction that happens online, offline, no matter where it happens, right? And you cannot consummate a transaction without a payment. But I believe that a lot of the payment systems that have been built today, that we use today, were built like 20 years ago. So not even on like a modern tech stack. I want you to dig deeper into this idea of how you optimize, how you differentiate, how you acquire, because I think it's key. And I'm curious how it fits into the technological solution as well. Because you mentioned with the tools you had before, as great as they were, you couldn't solve those problems.
You've actually raising something that is super interesting. And I think people don't realize it, I think, but payment is literally part of our life.
Everywhere.
Everything you do has like everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you've seen like phenomenal experiences happening over the last couple of years with the likes of Uber, for example, which made payment disappear.
Yeah.
Right. So you're having like this extremely seamless experience. You jump into a car, you go out, payment is happening, but you don't even see it. Right. And I do think that, more and more companies, actually, I'm convinced because I see it every day, right?
Yeah.
Are looking at they're looking at payment not as this afterthought or that thing that just needs to work at the end of the purchasing funnel.
Right.
They're looking at it as an integral part of the experience they're trying to provide, right? And if you want to actually do that, you need to think of payments as almost like a catalyst for innovation. And if you're thinking that way, obviously you need to rethink the way you integrating or managing payments. And the reality is, payment today is a combination of services, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna have obviously like the payment service provider, but the reality is you need more than one. You need more than one for a multitude of reasons. You need more than one in order to optimize for market coverage. You need more than one to optimize for resiliency. You need more than one to optimize for performance. But that's just like, you know, a very small part of like what should be a payment stack.
Yeah.
Then you may want to actually optimize for fraud prevention. And so if you want to do that properly, you need to integrate like a special solution for that, which is agnostic from the different services or the different PSPs that I just mentioned. But then you may want to actually use a communication service. What happens if you, Michael, you're trying to buy like, you know, a pair of shoes and you can't pay on the checkout for some reason? Well, you know, maybe you want to receive a text message that says, "Hey, Michael, we've seen that you couldn't pay, and here is a coupon code." And the merchant on the other side may want to receive a notification when this is happening. And then you have like the things which are more on the customer side, which are the pay methods. You know, you may want to have like, you know, a specific open banking solution in Australia, or eventually buy now pay later, or something specific for, you know, the Netherlands and so on and so forth. So I could go on forever. Like the reality is that payment is touching like many teams within the company, from marketing to finance to security to customer success. How can you solve that efficiently? That's the big question we need to ask ourselves. In order to solve that efficiently, you need to have an underlying infrastructure that will essentially allow the merchants to connect all these services which are not typically connected.
Can you tell me the why it's so important for these services to be connected? Again, just based on this conversation that I was
Absolutely.
having a couple of days ago, you wouldn't necessarily think that even on the vendor side, that the payment matters that much. But actually for them, you can also make that frictionless and seamless. And if it's easier for them, well, then their sales team can actually do more sales because they can feel like if they're more efficient, if their back office is more efficient, they don't have to worry about what happens post sale. They just know it gets taken care
Exactly.
of. But then it also should be connected to your data systems as well. So you can do all this data analysis. It's not just for the purchaser. Can you just give an example of how all that stuff is tied together? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's actually try to think of a workflow, actually. Let's try to sort of visualize what could be a workflow when you're using Primer, right? So you may want to do a couple of things on the merchant side, right? So you actually may realize that you have, I'm going to take something very simple for everyone to understand. I'm going to try to use like terms which are not too payment specific, right? Because we love acronyms in payments for some reason.
Every business loves it.
Um,
But yeah, go ahead.
exactly. So workflow could be, okay, like, you know, a payment is being created. So you know, payment creation is essentially at the point of which like the user on the checkout will click pay, right? And so the trigger on the workflow is the payment creation. And then you could say, all right, yeah, I know that for basket above a certain amount, so let's say you're selling like, you know, fashion items, you know that, you know, when the amount is greater than 10,000 USD, fictitious example, you have higher risk of fraud, right? And it's a luxury item, let's put it that way. That's the condition. And so if this happens, you want to actually split the traffic across like two PSPs. You want to sort of like make sure that you're not going to send everything to one provider. So that could be another, you know, condition that you add here. So all these condition block, we call those utilities on Primer. You say, okay, trigger is the payment. First condition is it's luxury. The item is above like 10,000 USD. And I don't want to send everything to one provider. I want to split the traffic 50% to PSP1, 50% to PSP2. And then at this point, you actually want to do, you select the provider. But what you want to do here, you know that you have highest chances of fraud with, you know, these items. You want to actually do a fraud check. So when you're actually like, you know, accepting payments, you can actually do a fraud verification. And you can do it at like two steps at the point of pre-authorization. So before authorizing the payment, or post authorization. So in that case, you could say, all right, I'm going to do the fraud check pre-auth, and then I'm going to actually select my payment service provider. And if that payment service provider is down for some reason, or if there is a soft decline, I'm going to select a fallback provider. So these are things that you can start doing on Primer. Eventually, if you wanted to, you could also like toggle like, our AI product, and we can discuss that. But essentially with that product, we will essentially optimize. All right, you have it on your.
That was the note I just wrote to
notepad.
myself just now. Because in the context of fraud, right? I do a lot of stuff in the insurance
Yeah.
space, right? When I talk to insurers and insurtechs, they spend a lot of time talking about how artificial intelligence can help them detect fraud even on the margins, right? Even if they're edge conditions, but they
Yeah.
do happen. So can you talk about that a little bit as well? Because the real question was,
Absolutely.
were there new technologies that you had to employ to be able to create this new tech stack that you were talking about? And where does AI fit in?
Yeah. So I'll explain the AI in a sec, but I'll just finish the workflow so that
Go ahead.
the audience understand like the sort of like ways all these services are connected. So you select the PSP, you select the fallback PSP, and if you're in a market where like 3D Secure is relevant, again, quite specific to EU and APAC, but you may want to toggle like 3DS and either like having a link to the forward response, or like have it like, forced, or you can even offload the logic to us, right? But then like let's go a step further. So now you sort of like did a pre-authorization, you split the traffic, you've selected your provider, and again, what happens if the payment fails for some reason,
Yeah.
right? And you're on the checkout and you're like, whoa, okay, I want to buy these things.
Right.
What you can do on Primary is say, okay, the status of the payment is like a failure, or some other status. I want to send like a text message to Michael, and I want to notify my customer success team. And so what we've been doing here is we've actually like allowing businesses to rethink the way they're managing payments, and we are able to bring in like different departments into one single framework to
Right.
think of the user experience. And we can go like, even a step like further here. Like having connections to KYC providers, we having connections to things like PagerDuty to manage like, if there is like, an incident or things like that. We have connections to Trello, Twilio, many, many things across the commerce lifecycle. But we are bringing those within payments,
Right.
which is like, an extremely huge innovation, right? It's unique. No one has done that, right? It's groundbreaking. And it's what's interesting to me, Michael, and then I'll stop talking, is that,
Keep going.
is that when I'm jumping on a call with a merchant, and I'm doing that like, every single week,
Right.
right? I love to talk to businesses. It's a passion, right? I
Yeah.
love to solve like what they're trying to do with payments. What's interesting is how like when they start seeing Primer, it's almost as if like Primer always existed.
Right.
It's so clear. I was like sort of whiteboarding these things on the whiteboard, and we create a product out of it. And what's interesting is how like quickly they start bringing people from different departments, marketing, support, finance, all these departments, so that they can work all together from the Primer platform, from the Primer dashboard. This is fascinating in my view.
You whiteboard this out. You imagine what you think the impact is going to be, but you kind of don't know until somebody starts using it, right? So once they pull all these departments in, they all get on the same dashboard. Now it means that they're all looking at this kind of one same truth. So that when they're having a conversation about whether it's sales or marketing or back office settlement or reconciliation, they're all looking at the same thing. How has it changed, do you think, the way they work internally on the merchant side, right? Because you're trying to solve a lot of problems for them. Go ahead.
The result of all this is that you're reducing the silos. You're creating like a lot more
Completely.
collaboration across departments, right? And the same thing, like we are creating like connectivity between services. The same thing happened like in the real world between those teams. Now they can actually reason about payments together.
Right.
Right. And that's like quite fascinating if you think about it. Just taking a step back here. When we started Primer, the thing that we've done like from the very beginning is, okay, scrap what we know. Let's actually start fresh. And we've talked to so many businesses,
Right.
hundreds of them across different verticals, geos, everything. And we were like trying to really have an unbiased view of what we were trying to solve, right? I was my co-founder. We were like, at Braintree and PayPal for many years. So naturally, like you think in a way, right? Like you have like a way of thinking, and we try to sort of like, scrap that and start like from fresh. And so we knew when we started developing the product that we had product market fit in a way, because
Right.
we were having all these interviews. We had like a past, experience, and we had that sort of very grand vision to sort of really reinvent payments and connect all these services together. So this notion of like bring everyone to the same canvas and creating connections between services, but also like teams, was very much part of our vision.
Was there any surprise that you found when you were interviewing all these companies? Again, you've been in the payments business, you said, for 10 years. Your co-founders probably has a ton of experience as well. But when you come out of an existing legacy business, which I've done, you think in a way, even subconsciously, that you may not be aware of per se. So even when you're asking your questions, you may phrase them in a way, right, that gives an unexpected answer. Did you have any of those experiences, if you know what I mean?
It's very interesting because like when you actually like in our past life, when we're like part of like Braintree and PayPal, again, amazing company.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you get you have like the PayPal and Braintree hat, right? So whatever you're asking, the person on the other side of the table will answer, like, knowing who you are in a way.
Right, right, right.
We as Primer, we're completely agnostic.
Yeah,
So I could have like a complete separate discussion with someone with the Braintree hat and the Primer hat,
right.
right? And this is what happened. So I would like reconnect with someone, and we would know each other from like my past years at Braintree and PayPal, and with the Primer hat, the conversation would be completely different because they know that we are completely agnostic. What we are here to do is help you optimize your payments experience, create new commerce experiences, use payment as a lever for growth, innovate with payments, optimize like the way you're thinking and consuming payment services. And the one thing that was very clear to us is that all companies out there want to expand their payment stack, and no exception whatsoever. Everyone want to use more services, right? And the reason for that is because there's a huge amount of innovation happening in the payment space. It's amazing. Like you always have new things, like new either a payment method or different services that you could use throughout the life cycle of the payments, and that became like very clear to us. The other thing as well, which was interesting, is how the merchant were telling us that they had very little understanding of the data aspect of things.
Right.
The more services you use, even if you use like a few, they were like, yeah, it's a black box. We don't really understand. It's very hard for us to reason about payments. And so that's something that is super critical for us at Primer, right? We are, as an infrastructure provider, we are here to provide visibility. And we've built like services around that. We have our visibility product, we have monitoring, we have alerting. And that's like a very critical part of what we're offering to our businesses. We want to give like superpower to people managing payments, if you think
Yeah.
about it. They have this super, elegant engine now. They have visibility. They can do amazing things the moment they have Primer integrated.
So can we talk about this in a little bit more detail? Because you've used this term a few times already, lever for growth. I love this term, actually. And I don't think that most people outside of the payment space are thinking about this as a lever for growth. But if I understand the way your platform has been built, right, connecting to all these different services, building your own services, and then creating essentially an ecosystem around payments that solves problems for your clients, you enable this sort of synergistic experience that couldn't exist before because all this stuff was siloed. We can talk later about the data, but can you talk about how that all now pertains to this lever for growth? Maybe give an example or some kind of anecdote.
If you don't have Primer, like all these services need to be integrated separately, right? So you have to learn and reason about like, payments multiple times. You have to try to find ways to create that logic internally at your company. And obviously that you need to invest a lot of resource into that, right? The moment you have us integrated, now you can sort of like think of your payments roadmap as a very simple process in a way. You
Right.
just go, and something that would typically take like 24 months, which we've seen, is now like a couple of weeks or hours or days, or so at this point, like, you're not going to wait like, months to launch into the market. You're not going to wait like months to create new experiences. You're not going to wait like days to optimize like the user experience on the checkout. You can just do it. It's phenomenal. You, as in like a non-technical individual managing like, a payments at a company, or being part of like the group managing like the user experience or the commerce experience, can just go in the dashboard of Primer and launch new services, optimize the presentment on the checkout, and all these things. So if you can do that, you can, for example, launch your market a lot faster.
Yeah.
You can, for example, like, present a payment method that your marketing team want to actually like add to the checkout in a couple of clicks. You can start doing all these things in a matter of a few clicks, when in reality, it would take like, a tremendous amount of time.
You said marketing into the payments. So were there situations in the past, right, where like marketing wanted to do a discount or do some kind of, special payment, like for this item only, you can make 4 payments, but for most other things, you can't do this BNPL thing. But now that they're all integrated, are you suggesting that the marketing team doesn't have to wait for somebody in the payments team to like do some special programming for this particular discount, because now they can just do it themselves?
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you think about it, like, if you're like in a marketing team, again, taking a fictitious example, but like you're in a marketing team, you're like in a fashion group, right?
Yep.
And you're discussing with your peers, and you're like, you know what, like we want to attract new customers, right, onto the website. And in order to do that, we want to integrate like a buy now pay later,
Right.
right? And so if you don't have Primer, you
Right.
go and you talk to several teams, and you're like, guys, this is what we're going to do. Sure, we try to find space in the roadmap. We're going to have to learn how to integrate those services, and so on and so forth. Now, if you have Primer, you're like, guys, we want to actually launch that. Okay, fine. You just go in the dashboard. You need to have a relationship with those providers you want to launch, right? We are pure technical infrastructure. From a go live perspective, it's literally like a few clicks, create a workflow, and super important as well, you can optimize the way that payment method will be presented on the checkout.
Right.
Very relevant. Why? Because I think, some people think that the more things you present on the checkout, the higher will be a conversion rate.
No.
Well,
It's got to be the opposite.
Correct. Yeah, it has to be relevant.
Yeah.
Relevance is critical, right? If you, Michael, arrive on a checkout, at your favorite, like, fashion brand or like, furniture website, and you see like a list of things, you're going to be like, whoa, what's going on here? But if you see like your favorite payment methods, if you see like, things that you're familiar with, then at this point, like, you're going to feel comfortable. It's a matter of like trust, and you're going to go ahead and pay, right?
Yeah.
And what we allow like, companies to do at Primer is to have like a fully dynamic checkout. We call that dynamic presentment. So the marketing person can go in and say, you know what, that buy now pay later, I'm not going to show that to everyone. I'm only going to show it when the amount is greater than 10,000. Again, taking the example that I used earlier.
Right.
And when we're selling like, a specific item, and boom, buy now pay later will just be presented for the specific items. So not only we allow for a quick activation, we're also allowing for relevance and the right experience on the checkout.
Would it allow the marketing team to do some sort of strategic testing, like test this on this guy, test this on that gal, and do that kind of thing, and then just not roll it out to everybody, but just pick some cohorts and do some tests, and then get the data, and then make a bigger decision on how to do that?
100%. We're bringing like principles and concepts which are like almost impossible, like in the world of payments.
Yeah.
A/B testing, all these things.
That's
now you can just do it. It's a simple process. So you're absolutely right. I want to present that payment method here. I want to use this provider there. All these things are now possible.
Yeah, there's nothing I hate at checkout more than too many choices. And to be fair, in any part of your life, right? If you know what I've been purchasing, right, because you have all this data, then you should be able to present to me the best options just for me. And maybe this gets back to the artificial intelligence conversation. Like, that's a place where you can use AI to do personalization and customization. For me, you can also do it on the merchant side. I presume, sorry, this just popped in my head, but I presume this works on a B2B basis as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we can work with B2B, B2C, right? Absolutely. on the AI side of things, like we have a tremendous amount of data at Primer, right?
You must.
As a payments infrastructure, yeah, we see a lot of like we see everything happening throughout this sort of like payment life cycle, and we gather like a huge amount of data points. And so what we've been doing over the last couple of years is we've been working on our machine learning algorithm, and what we are able to do now is we know where to send the payments to optimize for authorization rate. So we have, if you use Uplift AI, which is a phenomenal like, innovation, like we bring AI to the world of payments and no one has done that. At this point, like if you toggle like, Primer, Uplift AI product, we will actually like, know where to send the transaction to optimize for payment success, right? And there's this notion at Primer, which is that we've built like a tremendous amount of tools and services to increase payment success. A payments on Primer has higher chances of success than a regular payments, which is for the merchant side or for the merchant, specifically, an amazing opportunity, right? They know that with Primer, they're gonna have like a higher authorization rate and obviously further down the road, like, high revenue and all that, right? So this notion of payment success is super critical for us. And you can only do that if you have a unified payments infrastructure, which is essentially what we're providing.
And this is all blind to me, right? Like I can't see it as a customer, as a consumer. I
You
try
don't
to
see
make
anything.
I try to make a payment.
Yeah.
So what you're saying essentially is it can go to this location, that location, this location, and wherever it gets the best shot of being authorized, you're just going to keep going back there. But you can still test all three of them at the same time for any of these authorizations.
Our model would run in the background and would sort of like we wouldn't know where to send the payment. So like the user doesn't see anything and then like okay, like this payment boom needs to go to that provider, right? So but we have like many other services, right, in order to support like payment success. Fallback as well. Like if a provider is down, we can sort of fall back to another provider. So but this notion of like payment success is super critical. You as a merchant, you want to make sure that whatever happens, the user on the checkout will be able to pay. That's the principle here that we're bringing to the market.
I want to make an analogy, and I'm sure you'll understand this. When I was sitting on an equity portfolio trading desk, we built algorithmic trading systems because at the beginning, let's just use Japan as an example. There was the Tokyo Stock Exchange, the Osaka Stock Exchange, and some of the shares traded on both of them. Not a lot. But then once you started getting dark pools, right, which were sort of just accumulations of stocks that some proprietary trading desks had, let's say, you could send it to 10 locations and see where it got filled. And essentially, you're writing algos to do the same type of thing. You're not trading because you don't want to get overfilled. And we didn't want to get overfilled either. But it's the same idea. It's just that there are multiple places where we can get authorized. And let's just go to the one with the highest possibility. And if that one's not available, we can fall back and the consumer never knows. They don't have to know. It just says either yes or no to them. If you're gathering all this data, at some level, you're gathering data on the, what did you call them, PSPs? Like who gives the best service, like all this stuff about them as well. So is there a way for you then, once you gather all that data, to get better pricing for yourself if you move more of your payments to a place that's easier to get authorized? And then your clients kind of get better service and better payments?
It's a good question, but I want to make sure that the audience understands something that is super critical about Primer. We are purely a technical infrastructure. So from our perspective, we are not in the flow of funds. So we're never touching any money at Primer. We're providing the underlying infrastructure to connect all these services. So if, for example, you have your store, Michael, and you want to use Primer, and you want to use like all those different services, the PSPs, the fraud provider, the communication services, the operational tools, all these things, you need to have an account and a relationship with all of them, right? So you will negotiate pricing, you will open up an account and go through like, their onboarding process and all that. Now, what we will allow you to do is to have a good sense of who's the best performing product or services for your own business. So yes, I mean, if you have like, visibility, we are like, we're agnostic at Primer. We don't have an opinion, right? On like, who you should go with, but we're going to give you the data to sort of instruct yourself, educate yourself on who's best for your business.
Yeah. There must be other services that you're going to plug into this as you move forward. There just must be. Like, is insurance something you guys are looking at?
Yeah, well, it depends like how you think of insurance. Like you could have insurance as a module on the checkout.
You can
You could
embed
have
it, right? So embedded insurance is a big thing right now. You can work with some of the biggest insurers in the world to provide them a connectivity service to any of your merchants that want to provide embedded insurance into any of the products that they're selling.
exactly. Yeah, it absolutely could be an option. Like we are like very open at Primer. And the more like, the payment ecosystem is evolving,
Yeah,
and the more like, merchant actually are aware of the possibilities, the more we'll see like services be integrated to Primer. We have like so many interesting conversation. Like the moment like the Primer framework is integrated, we have merchant asking us, can we bring this? Can we bring that? Can we actually add this service now? Can we, do all these things? The one thing that is super critical as well is we are helping the merchant, but we are also like, helping the ecosystem.
for
We're
sure.
becoming the biggest enabler in payments and commerce because now, all these services can get integrated and activated super fast. It's not a matter of like, months of integrations anymore. I have an account with that provider.
Right.
Boom, I can go live in a matter of days. We're very much like creating a complete new dynamic on the market, which is always what we wanted,
Yeah.
right? We wanted to sort of make sure that now like payments has to be a catalyst for growth and innovation. It has to be more than just this afterthought. And by providing the tools and services obvious to the merchant, obviously you're creating like, innovation on the partner side as well. And so there's a complete shift in the market since we've launched Primer.
So one of the other things that really interests me is this idea of engagement, right? We touched on it a little bit before. You said if this thing happens, you can get a text message sent to somebody in customer service or something. But are there other
Mm-hmm.
ways that you see where engagement is really important? Because every time somebody makes a payment, it's an opportunity for some kind of engagement. You don't have to use it every time, but it's always an opportunity, right? Because you make a payment, it's like the beginning of a conversation for somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. There's this notion of like, social commerce.
Yeah.
I remember like, back when I was like in the US, like we had this I haven't used it much, right? Because I was there for like about a year, and we had this product called Venmo, right? Where like you sort of like almost creating that social experience around like the notion of like, paying like your peers, and
Yep.
now you can add Venmo on the checkout. So I think, for these services specifically, there's very much that notion of creating a community around payments and to create some social engagement. And I do see that as like eventually something, you want to apply to like other checkout experiences. You're
Yeah.
buying, you could say like, hey, I just bought this product and post it on social media, or you've done a donation and you want to share it with like a group of friends and, bring them onto your journey. So yeah, I do see like a world where like this is actually like, possible. And the good thing is because of our framework and because like, the openness of Primer, we could add these services as part of the payment lifecycle.
It sounds like you're having a ton of fun. Before I let you go, can you just tell me what the long term vision is here?
Absolutely. I mean, we have like a very, big vision and extremely high ambition at Primer, right? We're now like, working with businesses across the globe in APAC, in the US, across the UK, EU. One thing that is very unique with Primer as well is that we're fully remote. So I started Primer as a fully remote organization,
Yeah.
right, with my co-founder. Why? Because we know that what we're solving is global, right? And also because I wanted to make sure that we could have the best talent from all over the world working with us
Yep.
in what we're creating. But also, I wanted to make sure that we had experience from all over the world for our customer,
Right.
right? And what Primer is doing right now is we are fundamentally reinventing payments, right? We're fundamentally reinventing how merchants from all sides are thinking about the action of taking payments and managing payments. When you're thinking of that specifically, the opportunity for us is tremendous because now we are essentially like, creating a complete new dynamic on the market, both on the merchant side and the partner side. And so our vision is, to become the underlying framework for like, anyone out there who's like thinking about payments and willing to accept payment, which is obviously like, anyone who's online and eventually like offline at some point for Primer.
Yeah.
And so there's many things we're working on the data side, on the AI side, on the checkout experience, on payment success more generally. And so you're gonna hear about us like, a lot in the coming years because like we have a team that is passionate about payments. who's continuously like looking to innovate, and who's fundamentally here to help businesses with, that revolution that is happening within payments today. And I think 2023 was like very much like a turning point, right? I think many of us within payments have always been thinking as like payment as an asset, payment as like, this catalyst for innovation. And I do think that it is happening right now. We are like very much at a turning point, and Primer is the engine supporting that revolution, which is extremely exciting for us.
I can hear the passion in your voice. Gab, thank you so much for doing this. Co-founder and CEO of Primer. And that was awesome. Really awesome.
Thanks a lot, Michael.